The Easter Story from Palm Sunday to Easter Day, narrated by Natalie Wood from First Bible Stories, published by Paragon.
Entering Jerusalem from First Bible Stories, Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19 and John 12. On the outskirts of Jerusalem, Jesus spoke to two of his disciples. "Go on ahead of us," he said. "At the edge of the next village you will find a donkey. Bring it to me, and if anyone asks you why you are taking it, tell them that I sent you and that I will return it to them." The men found the donkey, threw their cloaks over its back and helped Jesus to climb on. When the people realized that Jesus had arrived in Jerusalem, they came out to greet him. Some threw their cloaks down in front of him as he rode along. Others laid down palm branches. "Praise God," they shouted. "God's King is coming." On entering Jerusalem, Jesus went straight to the temple. He found it full of men buying and selling doves. Others were exchanging money for special temple coins. Jesus was furious and began to drive them out. "This is a place of prayer," he cried, "and you have made it into a den of thieves." After this, Jesus healed people who were ill. When the chief priests heard what he had done, they were really angry. With so many people following Jesus, the priests saw him as a real threat to their power. They were now even more determined to kill him than before. 30 pieces of silver from First Bible Stories, Matthew 26, Mark 14 and Luke 22. It was nearly time for the feast of the Passover. As the disciples bought food at the market, Judas Iscariot crept quietly away to see the chief priests. Evil had entered his heart, and he no longer believed that Jesus was from God. When Jesus told the priests why he had come to see them, they were very happy. "How much would you pay me to give Jesus over to you quietly?" Jesus asked the priests. The priests counted out 30 pieces of silver and gave them to Judas. "I'll take you to him when he is alone, so that there is little trouble," Judas promised. And from then on, he started to look for the right moment to betray Jesus. The Last Meal from First Bible Stories, Matthew 26, Mark 14, Luke 22 and John 13. On the day before the Passover, Jesus told Peter and John to prepare for the meal. "But where shall we eat?" they asked him. "As you enter Jerusalem," replied Jesus, "you will meet a man carrying a water jar. He will take you to a house with an upstairs room. Prepare everything there for us." That evening, before the meal, Jesus knew that the disciples had been quarrelling about which of them was the best. So Jesus calmly took a basin of water and began to wash their feet. Peter was shocked. "I can't let you wash my feet," he said. "I want you to follow my example," said Jesus. "Whoever wants to be great in the kingdom of God must learn how to serve others as I am serving you." Then they sat down to eat. During the meal, Jesus said, "One of you is going to betray me, one who is eating with me now." Peter whispered to John, "Ask him who it is," and John did. Jesus replied, "The one who I give this bread to," and he gave each of them a piece of bread dipped in herbs. So still they did not know. But later, John remembered that Jesus gave the first piece to Judas and had said, "Go and do what you have to do." None of the others realized at the time what this had meant. The disciples thought that Jesus was telling Judas, who looked after their money, to go and buy more food. They saw Judas leave the room and knew it was night. Then Jesus promised the disciples that God's Spirit would always be with them and not to be afraid. He knew that this would be the last meal he shared with them. He took a piece of bread, thanked God for it, and broke it into pieces. "This is my body," he said. "Like this bread I will be broken. I will die for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he lifted a cup of wine, thanked God again, and passed it around. "This is my blood," he said. "It will be spilled for many people. Drink it in remembrance of me. We shall not drink together again until we are in God's kingdom." A garden called Gethsemane, from First Bible Stories, Matthew 26, Mark 14, and Luke 22. After the meal, Jesus climbed up the Mount of Olives with his friends until they came to a garden called Gethsemane. As they walked, Jesus spoke to them. "This very night you will all run away and leave me." "I would never do that," protested Peter. "Before the cock crows," said Jesus, "you will say 3 times that you do not know me." "Even if I have to die, I will never say that," cried Peter. The other disciples agreed. At Gethsemane, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him, leaving the rest to wait outside. "My heart is full of sadness," said Jesus. "I must go and pray. Stay here and keep watch." He went a little further and knelt to pray. "Father," Jesus prayed, "if it is possible, save me from this death, but only if it is your will." Then he went back to Peter, James, and John and found them fast asleep. He woke them up and asked them again to keep watch. This time, Jesus went deeper into the orchard to pray. Twice more he came back to the 3 disciples, only to find them asleep again. As he woke them for the 3rd time, Jesus heard the sound of voices and saw the light of torches coming nearer. The temple guards and the chief priests were heading towards Jesus. They had come to arrest him. Judas was leading them. "The man you want is the man I kiss," said Judas to the guards. He walked over to Jesus and kissed him on the cheek. The guards quickly closed around Jesus, but he did not resist. Peter drew his sword and cut off the ear of the chief priest's servant. "That's enough," said Jesus, and he reached out and healed the man's ear. Then he turned to the priests and guards. "Why have you come armed with swords as if I were a criminal?" he asked. But the priests and guards marched him off into the night without a word. Then all of Jesus' friends ran away, just as Jesus had said they would. I do not know him, from First Bible Stories, Matthew 26, Mark 14, Luke 22 to 23, and John 18. The guards took Jesus to the high priest's house. Peter followed and slipped into the courtyard. He joined a group of people around the fire. Suddenly, a servant girl noticed him and began to stare. "Weren't you with Jesus?" she asked. "No, I do not know him," replied Peter. Then, a short time after, another person asked him, "Weren't you a follower of Jesus?" Again, Peter denied it. An hour later, a third person said, "You come from Galilee. You must know Jesus." "No, I do not know him," cried Peter. At that very moment, the cock crowed, and Peter remembered what Jesus had said. He left the courtyard, broke down, and wept. Meanwhile, the Jewish council was trying to find evidence to convict Jesus and put him to death. Many false witnesses came forward and told lies, but this was not enough. Finally, the high priest questioned Jesus himself. "Aren't you going to answer these charges?" he demanded. Jesus did not reply. "I am putting you under oath," said the high priest. "Are you the Son of God?" "You say that I am," said Jesus. "From now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at God's side." Furious, the high priest spoke to the council. "The prisoner claims to be equal with God," he said. "We do not need any more witnesses after this outburst. What do you think?" "Guilty!" the council all shouted. "He must die." As soon as Judas heard that Jesus had been sentenced to death, he was overcome with guilt and grief. He went to the priests and threw the 30 pieces of silver onto the floor. "I have sinned," he cried. "I have betrayed an innocent man." The priests laughed at him. Then Judas went away and hanged himself. Meanwhile, Jesus was taken before the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. The Jews could not execute Jesus without the governor's agreement. "He claims to be a king," they told Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "That's what you say," replied Jesus, and then he kept silent. He refused to answer any more of Pilate's questions. Pilate could find nothing that Jesus had done wrong and wanted to set him free. Father, forgive them. From First Bible Stories, Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23 and John 18. It was a Jewish custom to pardon and set free a prisoner at the time of the Passover. Pilate wanted to free Jesus, but the Jewish leaders were determined to get their way. "Jesus must die," they said. "He claims to be the Son of God, which is against our law." When he heard this, Pilate was afraid. He ordered that Jesus be whipped. The soldiers made a crown out of thorns for his head and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then Pilate presented him to the crowd. "Do you want me to kill your king?" he asked. "Crucify him," came the reply. "Crucify him and free Barabbas instead." Then, crying, "Jesus' death is on your hands," Pilate freed the murderer Barabbas, and the soldiers led Jesus away. Jesus was forced to carry a huge wooden cross through the streets to Golgotha, the place of execution. As he passed, people mocked him and spat at him. He stumbled and fell, and the soldiers ordered one of the crowd, a man called Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross for him. A group of weeping women followed Jesus. He turned to them, saying, "Do not weep for me, rather weep for yourselves and your children." At last they came to Golgotha. There, guards nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross. They nailed a notice above his head which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Jesus was in great pain. The guards offered drugged wine, but he refused. Then the guards set up the cross, with a thief on either side of him. "Father, forgive them," he prayed. "They know not what they are doing." The Son of God, from First Bible Stories, Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 23 and John 19. People jeered at Jesus, calling out, "If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross and we will believe in you." One of the thieves joined in with the jeers as well, but the other thief said, "We deserve our punishment. This man has done nothing wrong. Remember me, Jesus, when you come again as King." "I give you my promise," replied Jesus. "Today you will be with me in paradise." Jesus looked down at Mary, his mother, who was leaning on John's arm, and said, "Mother, here is your son." Jesus looked at John and said, "Here is your mother." Then John took Mary away to live in his home. Beneath the cross, the soldiers were throwing dice to win Jesus' seamless robe. Suddenly at 12 o'clock the sky went dark and a great shadow blotted out the sun. For 3 hours there was scarcely any light. Jesus cried aloud, my God, why have you left me?" A little later he called out, "I thirst," and a soldier soaked a sponge in wine, stuck it on a stick and held it to his lips. At 3 o'clock, Jesus gave a terrible cry and said, "It is finished. Father, into your hands I place my spirit." Then he died. A Roman soldier who was standing nearby heard Jesus and said, "This man was truly the Son of God." Another soldier pierced Jesus' side with a spear to make sure that he was dead. Finally, they gently lowered his body down from the cross. The tomb, from First Bible Stories, Matthew 27 to 28, Mark 15 to 16, Luke 23 to 24, and John 19 to 20. Later that day, Joseph from Arimathea arrived. He was a follower of Jesus and had permission from Pilate to take Jesus' body away for burial. Joseph and Nicodemus prepared Jesus' body according to Jewish custom. They wrapped it in fine linen and special spices and took it to a tomb that had just been dug out of the rock. Mary Magdalene and some other women watched as a large stone was rolled across the entrance and the tomb was sealed. The next day was the Jewish Sabbath, and the Jews asked Pilate to have the tomb guarded. They remembered only too well what Jesus had said about rising from the dead. At sunrise on Sunday, Mary Magdalene and some women returned to the tomb. When they reached it, they found that the stone covering the entrance had been rolled back and the guards had disappeared. Inside, the women found an angel. "Do not be afraid," said the angel. "Jesus is not here. He is risen from the dead. Look, this is where his body was. Go and tell his disciples the good news. You will see him soon in Galilee, just as he promised." The women, filled with fear and happiness, ran back to tell the disciples. On hearing the news, John and Peter ran to the tomb and saw the burial clothes lying there. They believed what had been said to them and hurried away, leaving Mary Magdalene weeping by the entrance. Then a voice asked her, "Why are you crying?" Mary thought that it must be the gardener. "Sir, if you've taken my Lord, please tell me where to find him," she said, "and I will go and take him away." "Mary," came the reply. It was Jesus. She was overjoyed. "Go and tell my friends you have seen me," Jesus told her. Risen from the dead, taken from First Bible Stories, Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24, and John 20 to 21. Later that same day, Jesus appeared to 2 of his followers as they were walking home from Jerusalem. They did not recognize him and asked him if he would like to eat with them. As Jesus blessed the bread and broke it, the 2 men realized who he was. Then Jesus vanished. The 2 men rushed back to Jerusalem to tell their friends what had happened. As the men were telling their story, Jesus suddenly appeared to them all, saying, "Peace be with you." The disciples were really afraid, as they thought they were seeing a ghost. "See and touch my hands and feet," said Jesus, showing them the nail marks. "Ghosts are not made of flesh and blood." Then he sat and ate with them, and they knew that this really was Jesus, who was risen from the dead. Thomas wasn't there that night, and when he was told what the disciples had seen, he did not believe it. "Unless I see and touch the wounds myself," he said, "I will not believe." A week later, the disciples were gathered together again. Jesus appeared to them all, and all Thomas's doubts vanished. The next time Jesus appeared was in Galilee. The disciples had been fishing on the lake all night but had caught nothing. In the morning, a man called to them from the shore. It was Jesus. Throw out your nets on the right, the man said. You will make a catch. And he was right. Then they ate a breakfast of bread and fish with him on the shore. 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter replied, "You know I do." He knew he was forgiven. Then look after my followers, Jesus told him. Thank you for listening.